Need a receipt of evidence notice.
The County Board of Supervisors September 17th meeting notice and agenda was posted in the Government Center building in 2 places and posted on the county website on September 12th, 2024. In addition, on Thursday, September 12th, 2024 at 3:23 p.m., the Office of the County Clerk distributed copies of such notice of meeting to supervisors and media via email.
Counselor,
That complies with the open meetings law.
thank you. Roll call.
Brad Olson,
Here.
Doug Rowdy,
Here.
Steve Wardahl,
Here.
Pamela Garvey. Here. Tracy LeBlanc. Here. Dan Ruck,
Here.
Sharon Kelly. Here. Jeremy Hall,
Here.
Kim O'Connell,
Here.
Tony Johnson,
Here.
Jay Luke,
Here.
Francis Duncanson. Here. Russ Arkand,
Here.
Keith Karpinski,
Here.
and John Bonaprise.
Here.
All 15 supervisors are present.
Please join me in the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the
Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Need a motion on the agenda.
So move.
Second. Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And that most matters for adoption with on the consent agenda. Need a motion for the
Move to approval.
Second.
motion made and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Public comment. We have a 3-minute limit on public comment with a 30-minute maximum or aggregate of 30 minutes. So whoever speaks, I think you've designated, I think you're pretty well versed on how to handle the public comments at our general government meeting for one. So the people that are going to speak are limited to 3 minutes. There is a crowd upstairs that we cannot see from technical difficulty. However, just want to let you know that there is a large group up there. I'm not sure how many, however. Now, from the past experience of general government, I do realize that a lot of the conversation or the comments are going to be made in reference to lack of understanding of what was happening as far as the addressing of the county. And generally, it's my understanding that the efforts and those things were done by the town. And so I'm gonna call on Paul Guidson, to your town chairman for Balsam Lake, which most of these are about, to address, excuse me, to address us so that we're a little apprised and aware of what did in fact happen. So I talked to Paul. He said he would address the group.
Want that now, Jay?
Yep, do it now, Paul.
Chair, do you want that part of the 30 minutes or separate from the 30 minutes of public comment?
No,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Paul Guidison. I am the chairman for the town of Balsam Lake. For the town board, public safety and road improvement, road maintenance is our priority. In fact, 85% of our town budget goes to those two topics. So when the county sent the town a letter that asking us to participate in a joint project with the county to update our non-compliant addresses. We took that letter very seriously. We reviewed the ordinance that we would fall under. We looked through it and believed that it was in the best interest of all the town residents from a public safety standpoint to be on the address grid. We reached out to the county to get some exact numbers of how many people this would affect. And the initial analysis came back at about 400 addresses that would need to be updated to make the non-compliant addresses compliant with the grid system. As the project progressed, we were then asked if we wanted to have the addresses apply to just the non-compliant addresses, or should we apply it to the entire town? We hadn't thought about applying it to the entire town until that point. But again, at that, we went back and reviewed the ordinance again. Each one of our elected officials took a tour of the 911 dispatch center and talked to the individuals there to determine what their challenges are and what their issues are with the current system and the current addressing. And again, we felt that it was in the best interests of all the town residents to go ahead and apply this ordinance to the entire town, not just the non-compliant addresses. Part of that rationale is that we felt that this was the intent of why that ordinance is there, and that eventually it was going to be applied to all the towns. And so instead of having to do two sets of address changes, this one for non-compliant addresses, and then in the future, when it's applied to everybody, that we didn't want to have to do it twice. So we decided to go ahead and apply it to the entire town. When we did that, it increased the number of address changes to approximately 630 address changes. The board passed a resolution to adopt that ordinance as part of our town for the entire town. And we believe that, again, that's what the board intended for all the towns to do. Now, this was not done quickly. This was not done in secret. We addressed this in the agenda in 2 annual elector meetings. We also had it on the agenda at 5 town board meetings before we made the final blessing to what the county had given to us in terms of making these address changes. All of the town board meetings are officially posted in 3 public locations, which is required by state statutes. That's our official means of notifying the public. In addition to that, we provide a courtesy notice in the Leader newspaper and in the weekly Yellow Page Advertiser. That courtesy notice provides the date, time, location of the meeting, and it gives everybody that sees that the location of the 3 places where the notices are published to the public. In addition to that, we felt we should give another courtesy notice to our property owners. So at our annual tax statement, we had prepared an insert to go into there explaining what we were doing with the address changes. That went from me to our treasurer, who was going to fill in the dates of when she was going to be at the shop, town shop, to accept tax payments for anyone that didn't want to mail them, bring them in person. Unfortunately, she took the wrong file, put the dates in the wrong file, sent that off to the publisher, and so the tax statement came out without the information that we had wanted to provide to all the residents about the address changes. We didn't see that obviously until we got our own tax statements. We had our board meeting in January, and at that point, we decided that we were not going to send out a second mailing to notify our residents of just that item. We felt that we had properly provided notice through what we were required to do, and we did not take any additional action to notify the public after that failed tax notice statement. From what we have heard at our public board meetings, the 2 biggest complaints from the residents, besides the fact that they felt that they didn't know about this, was that they liked their named road versus their numbered road, and that they want to maintain the history of their area with that named road. In terms of the second item, right from the very beginning, we agreed that we were going to post heritage signs on all of these roads. So the way that works is that the official road name is on the street above it, and underneath it in a different colored sign is the heritage sign. So we will be preserving the history of the road with a heritage sign on every road that we change the name on. So I guess in summary right now, with the changes that we have been given by the county and where we're at with implementation, the entire town of Balsam Lake is compliant with the grid. We believe that fixing the non-compliant addresses, which was the original reason the letter was sent out by the county, is a top priority. And we would be opposed to any changes in reversing a non-compliant address back to its old name and number. However, obviously in the ordinance, it's your purview to listen to petitions and to accept or reject those. If we did not interpret your guidance correctly in the ordinance, and if in fact, street has all the petitioners sign their name to a petition back to it, then we believe that if that's what they really want to do, then that is their prerogative. And if you want to reverse that, we're not opposed to that. We don't think that's in the best safety interests. I think if you are on the grid, anybody can find your address. If you are not on the grid, then you're required to have technology to be able to find that address, or you need to have a responder that's knowledgeable of the area. And if you don't have those two things, then you could have a delay in receiving help if you're not on the grid. So those are my comments. I'll be happy to address any questions if there are any from the board.
We wouldn't have any questions and answers for you at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now we're going to the, anybody that would like to make a comment, we're limited to 3 minutes to 30 minutes from now on. I had to clarify that fact because I know that was the big issue and nobody from the county board heard that we did at general government.
Starting down.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm Debbie Patterson. I'm on Deer Lake, Birchwood Terrace. 10 cabins, 8 owners. I feel I take umbrance with Paul in the sense that no one knew about this. We've talked about this. It's published in a newspaper, a bank, and a post office. None of the residents on my road live in the state of Wisconsin. We did go to a bank or a post office, we'd go to St. Croix Falls, which is 6 miles from our house and not this far. And that is not due diligence to the residents. Deer Lake has over 95% of the people are not from Wisconsin. So when if you look in the sub-ordinances of open meeting, and I published it on my appendix D, you can look at this, that they are supposed to get to the residents. They had it with the tax files. They could have sent us the letters. They chose to save some money. That is not fair. 6 people on this council had no input from over 330 homes on Deer Lake for this, of which none of us agree with. The second biggest point, I wish you'd read all of my comments that I sent on both petitions. This is just an addendum. We were approved before. And the fact that no research was really done. I know Jason thought he did all this, but the biggest problem, and I don't know if this is the township or the county, none of us had fire signs. None of us. I had just realized this last time I came that this was a big deal. And we talked to the fire department. They said if we had fire signs, that woman whose husband died 2 years ago on Deer Lake wouldn't have been a problem, would not. And they all say that to us. Every time we've talked to the fire department and the police, I've been here 22 years, never had an issue with anybody finding us. And only 2 years ago to get that lovely red sign. Happy to have it. It's prominently displayed. We all have them on my road. And half the Red Lake still doesn't have them because they don't know they're supposed to have them. Now, whose fault is that? The town or the county? I don't know. But as a city dweller, I had no idea about fire signs. Everybody's happy to put one in their yard. That's the safety issue. 911, anything else, it always finds everybody. There isn't a person it hasn't found. Not one person. And that is not going to go down. Those are satellites. There's backup mats. There's a million things. We have to embrace technology, not go back to 1978 grid that Jason decided to implement. Who knows why? 45 years it sat there. No one cared. And he pulled it out. I don't understand that. On the point that Logan made that we have some buildable lots, which I was shocked to find, but there are 250 footers. They're historically granted. I doubt anybody's ever going to build on them, but if they do, we do have 3 extra addresses on our road because somebody built over 3 lots. So we have extra addresses to take care of that one issue that we had on Birchwood Terrace. So we're covered there. And I hope it's not just a historical thing. I don't want to invite people to my house and can you come over to 1783, 133rd, say, who wants to do that? We've had these beautiful street names for over 100 years. A lot of them mean a lot to us. We care about it. We take care of our roads. We spend a ton of money on the roads. And I think we should be taken care of respectively. Thank you.
Dave? Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Linda Reller, and I live on Pinewood Road. Pinewood Road used to be part of Birchwood Terrace. And years ago, when they decided to give us a street sign, they changed ours to Pinewood Road, but we're in straight line to Birchwood Terrace. Well, the guy who did this new grid made us 132nd Avenue. They said because it's 13.2 miles from wherever. Well, Birchwood Terrace is now going to be 133rd. It's in the straight line. So they need to move the road then in front of the cabins and put it in the lake. So that's 13.3. We should have all been then 132nd. So now the problem is we have 8 houses on our road. 5 of the houses have the same house number as 5 of the houses on 133rd, right down the road. So 500 feet away from me is someone with the same house number and the same fire number, as well as my 4 neighbors. 500 feet from them, same house number, same fire number. How can that be? Fire numbers were supposed to be individualized. This is just going to be a nightmare if they put this into effect. There's just no way people are going to find it. Then they changed the road coming in and made that a street. Didn't even tell us in the letter. Didn't mention that that's going to be 179th Street to come into 132nd Avenue, which has 8 houses on it. It's just going to be one big nightmare for anybody to even find us. And the mail has already been messed up, and I just don't think this is a good idea. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Susan Nielsen. I live on Tanglewood Trail. I want to do 2 things. I want to share what was not shared to the Public Safety Committee, and I want to share some information about the Next Gen 911 technology and GIS mapping from the technical support team at that organization. I was in contact with them. They told us there's no restrictions with alphabet named roads. House numbers can have a letter after them. There's no technology problems with any of that. They said their mapping follows the NENA version 2 requirements, which is the National Emergency Naming Association, I believe. And that association is very specific that the roads need to have unique and be clearly and easily distinguishable in communication. So we also around Long Lake, we're the ones that submitted the multiple road petition around Long Lake. So we have road redundancy with the numbers. We have 170th and 173rd on each side of the lake. One is an avenue and one is a street. If you're in the wrong one, you're kind of got a long way to go around. What zoning did not tell the Public Safety Committee, our 5 road petition was thumbs down from the Safety Committee. What was not told is that there was 124 signatures for exemption. Zoning did not review the individual roads. They merely said it was non-compliant and that our reasons for the exception were insignificant, basically nothing burgers. It was then pushed to a vote without discussion, without allowing property owners to comment again. Is this really a legitimate process with the township when we didn't have any participation in that either? So Tanglewood Trail currently has over 40 properties on it. At the time of the public safety meeting, we were missing 2 signatures from Larson's and Christensen's, who are seasonal people. We now have their signatures, and I have resubmitted a petition to the county clerk. I know Holiday Drive, folks, if you guys are upstairs, I know you guys have done the same thing with your 15, 16 residents. They now have all the signatures. They were missing one signature when this was voted down. There was a Deer Lake Road that was missing a signature at the public safety meeting and they were approved. Ours got thumbs down. The chairman did not tell you that originally, to even enter into this agreement and to bring Balsam Lake Township into this, there was dissension on the township board. And they were basically rolled over and convinced that they needed to vote for this. So there's dissension among the board, there's dissension among residents and property owners. We've already talked about the other. So just in summary, there's no problem with the technology. Maybe the technology has moved ahead of this initiative. I'm not sure. I think the ordinance needs to be looked at. Certainly the process with no representation from us needs to be looked at again. And from researching,
3 minutes is up.
thank you. I'm going to go upstairs with my people.
Sure,
I'll be
go
out
ahead.
here. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Absolutely.
Okay,
My name is Brian Campbell. I moved up here May of last year. I've been looking at your slogan, Polk County slogan, Polk County, gift of the glaciers. Well, all the names on these roads were a gift to the people that lived there, the people that settled here, the people that grew up, made this their home. They made a lot of good points. But my question is this right now. Is that really representation? They found out that they didn't send it out to tax forms. I live on Loveless Lake. I live on the southeast side of Niles Lane. There are 35 homes there. There are 8 of us that live there year round. The rest are all cabins. They don't live there. They didn't get represented. You can do that to all the rest. This is a cabin community. It's not urban. It's a cabin community. This is why we love coming here. This is why we like people coming here. Spending their money, spending the time in the lakes. It's a gift of the glaciers. Here's another little twist. Who's going to pay for my driver's license replacement, my car registration replacement? My cards have to all be changed, address. Amazon doesn't know where we are. We already figured that one out. How about taxes, wills, trusts? Think about every one of you had to change your address. Think of everything that you have to change. And what's that going to cost you, not only in money, but in time? Hanging on the phone. Yeah, I'll get to somebody. Yeah, just wait. Be patient. Be patient. This was done wrong. GPS works. It works. And to not have, it really bothers me. It really bothers me that the township, 6 people decided this.
Yeah.
And all the people that live up here in Balsam Lake that have cabins that have no idea, except for a letter that they get in the mail, and then 3 weeks later, oh, yeah, the streets are changed. They're already done. I called last year to get a fire sign. I was told, oh, well, they're all going to get replaced in the next year. I got here in March. I haven't got one yet. And there's a whole lot of people on our road that do not have fire signs. There's a lot of people on lakes that don't have fire signs. But if it's a safety issue, why not just put those up?
Yes.
It's a lot cheaper and it causes a lot less problems to people. And it's a lot less money coming out of my pocket. And all these people upstairs, and all the people that signed the petition, I hope you reconsider this. And
thank you for your time. Anyone else?
I'm Lynn Baumgren. I hadn't planned on speaking, but I literally just drove up from Richfield, Minnesota, which is where we live full time. And yet we have a place on Long Lake, which we've had for 12 plus years. And my main frustration is we we've lived in Richfield for, I don't know, since 87, 83, I don't remember now, but address signs, we put them on our house and we pretty much know, okay, this is going to be our address. Kind of like what he was saying, it goes on everything that we do. And I feel frustrated being a cabin owner. We have a year-round place, but we don't live up here year-round. So some of whoever said about, where we're getting our information, we didn't get it. We didn't know about it. We come up here and enjoy the beauty of this area. And my main frustration is we just didn't have enough notice. And then to be told that it's going to be changing without any chance to hear our voice and maybe hear our frustration. I literally drove up just to come to the meeting today because I just feel like some of us that don't live here year round have a voice as well. So that's all.
Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and board members. My name is John Patterson. You heard from my wife a few minutes ago. She said that on our street, Birchwood Terrace, we have 8 owners and none of us live in Wisconsin. But we are heavily invested in Wisconsin, Polk County, our township. And make no mistake, we are a part of the fabric of this community. And we've been treated shabbily here. And it surprises me that the township wants to take control of our road, yet when a tree falls on our road and blocks it, we don't call the county, we don't call the town, we call our neighbors and we deal with it. When it snows, we don't call the county, we don't call the board, we call our neighbors. We deserved a stamp, a notice of this, and we wouldn't be here today if someone would have just given us, as cabin owners, a little bit of respect. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jay Becker. I live on Pinewood Road, next to Linda. Just wanted to again say, if you look at what is being proposed between 132nd and 133rd and changing the house numbers, it's going to be, there's a big opportunity for a lot of confusion. If someone goes to 133rd looking for our house, they're going to be 500 feet to the east. You would think that 132nd would be south of it. No, it's not south of it. It's west of it. The logic on how this was put together doesn't make sense. Pinewood Road, Polk County put that name on the road in the 90s. It's not like that was a road that just happened to be there. That was before Polk County. Polk County approved it. The names were put on in the 90s that's where that name was assigned. Again, as was mentioned, there's a huge expense in addition to a lot of confusion that's going to come from the new numbering system versus what we have today. When you look at 133rd, 132nd, yes, they butt up to each other. 132nd now is going to be 20 feet to the south. 133rd starts at Highway 8, so it starts at 130th and goes slowly to the north, but they pretty much almost would line up. There isn't logic if someone comes and by chance goes to 132nd looking for 133rd or vice versa. The way this is laid out, it lays the potential for a lot of confusion. GPS is here and it's working. I think we need to stay with what we have.
Anyone else? Anyone else? Any communication with upstairs? Anyone else? Yeah, we've made arrangements already for the ones that are upstairs, have no intention of speaking. So we will close the public comment and go to number 8, which is the presentation from PLA in regard to our 2023 audit.
Well, thank you for having me this evening. My name is Jonathan Sherwood. I'm a principal with Clifton Larson Allen. I was here for the July 10th governance or general government meeting. So I went into much further detail of my presentation at that meeting, but I'm happy to address any other comments or questions that might arise with my presentation of the 2023 audit summary here for you. As I said, this is all the audit was issued ahead of the July 31st deadlines. There was just a scheduling snafu, I guess, with the August agenda. So I apologize for my tardiness here of being here this evening. I was ready and willing to make my arrangements, but apparently some agendas got maybe miscommunicated. Appreciate that this evening. I want to start off my comments here just by thanking the various county department heads, everybody in finance that basically takes on a lot of our questions and our various requests throughout the audit process. Very appreciative of all of the prompt responses in order for us to basically put together our full audit summary. So everybody should have received just the audit. I think it's like a 10-page audit summary here. I'll spare you the 100+ page full audit report. And we'll try to keep my comments fairly high level. As I mentioned earlier, I did go into a lot more detail at the general government meeting back in July. So to start things off, page 1 here for you is just overall laying out kind of what goes into our audit process, and it actually lays out the only part of your audit report that actually CLA quote unquote owns. It's the auditor's opinion. So in your auditor's opinion, we issue what's known as an unmodified or a clean audit opinion. Basically, what that ultimately means for us is we have the highest level of assurance that an outside agency can grant over the financial statements. That includes the amounts and the disclosures of your financial statements. We also then do a completely separate audit of the Golden Age Manor nursing home facility, issue a similar report on those financials, and then roll them into the full county audit as well. As part of our audit, we also take a look at the internal control structure of the county. As such, we don't issue an opinion over the overall internal controls themselves, but we just take a look at how they're operating. Are they operating as intended or as designed? And if there's any matters that raise to the level of a certain level that needs to be brought in front of governance, we're required then to mention them at meetings such as this. So in our examination of the internal controls, there were 2 material weaknesses which we did present upon. And again, these are very similar, very common items. They're repeat findings from prior years. These 2 items don't a red flag large enough for me to say you've got to make any structural or drastic changes to your internal control structure, but there is some lacking in your overall controls that just need to be mentioned. So we have two separate items. The first being material audit adjustments, and the second being limited segregations and duties. The material audit adjustments, that basically means that in the course of our audit work, we propose audit adjustments to your financial statements in order to make sure that they're in compliance with all of the accounting rules, regulations, and that they're free from material misstatements of issuing your full audit statements. We do work very closely with finance, with administration, and with the various department heads in order to get things corrected as much as possible and ultimately to reduce the amount of audit adjustments that we have to propose to your books. And it's an ongoing effort. Every year we kind of work with them saying, here's something that didn't go quite right. Typically, a lot of these adjustments revolve around accounting standards, or accounting standard changes, as well as quite often the biggest issue for all of our county is grant revenue recognition, making sure that grant claims are in the proper period and are following the proper procedures there. In terms of just a caveat there, again, it is raises to the level of significance that I bring it up here in tonight's meeting. But I also then like to stress to all of my governance boards, so county boards here, that a good compensating control of having this specific finding, as well as the next finding of segregations of duties, is everybody's very active involvement in county government, making sure that when you're in your committee meetings, if there's any type of financial information that's being brought to the board, that there's proper questioning, good full transparency down to your department heads, and you're receiving those proper reports on a monthly basis. So leading into the limited segregations of duties, that just means that throughout the various county departments, there's certain times where there's only one, possibly two individuals that are very limited in, the same individuals taking care of deposits, receipts, checks, all of that kind of stuff. It's all being handled by one or two people. So just by the structure and all of those various departments, we obviously have a limited segregation of duty issue there. In order to completely eliminate those types of findings, you would obviously then just need to go in and hire a bunch more people, which is just not economically feasible. Both of these items are very common for organizations Polk County size. Also, as part of our audit, we perform what's known as a federal single audit, which is a compliance audit over all of the federal money that comes into the state, or federal and state money that comes into the county. And as such, we take a look at those various major programs and make sure that the county is in compliance with all of the rules, regulations of those various federal and state grant programs, excuse me. As such, we didn't find any compliance issues. There was no instances of non-compliance within any of the grant programs that we selected to test. So that's very good news there as well for you. Switching gears here onto some more financial information. I can flip to page 2 there for you. Again, very high level here. I'll keep my comments as brief as possible for you. Item number 1 here is just your general fund results. This is the general operations of Polk County. So this is anything that isn't necessarily required to be tracked elsewhere. This is your operations of Polk County in total. So really in terms of financial health, or how is the county doing on an operational standpoint, there's 3 highlighted rows that are available there for you. Those it really boils down to what you have in terms of your fund balance or your reserves that are going to be earmarked or set aside to meet future financial obligations. So you've got your unassigned fund balance, compared it to what your total expenditures are, what it takes to run the government or to run the county for an entire fiscal year. And then it computes it down to a percentage of unassigned fund balance to general fund expenditures. So as a general rule of thumb, from an outside perspective, we want to see that number anywhere between 25-33% to have a good solid cushion, so to speak, of if there's anything that unexpectedly would need to be coming out and financed by your reserves or out of fund balance. That's where we would want that minimum amount to really be at. Polk County does have an internal policy of a minimum of 40%. So you can see right now that in 2023, Polk County is actually operating at, and it leaves about 86.3%. So you're very, very fiscally healthy in terms of unassigned fund balance that's available to meet future obligations. Clearly, and when you have a 4-year layout here, you can kind of see the trend of where your fund balance has been historically over the last number of years. And really the main driver in a lot of this increased fund balance for a lot of our counties and a lot of our municipalities that we see has been just the increased federal money and COVID funding that has flowed into a lot of the various government agencies throughout the year. So in 2021, you can see we were actually at 100.1%. And now there's a natural spend down of a lot of these programs, a lot of those capital items which were delayed for whatever various reasons, supply chain, whatnot, what have you. All of those expenditures have now been recognized against this grant revenue. So you can see it now coming back into a more what you're historically going to see. It's typically within the county's fund balance policy of a minimum of 40%. So historically, that's where you typically reside. The only other thing to keep in mind here for fund balance, you do have other reserves that are on your books there. Those are other fund balance components of your fund balance. You are using some non-spendable items, which you obviously can't spend as definition. There's some restricted items there. And those are all restricted by an outside agency, typically grants, some state grants, the reserves there that are set aside for those specific projects. And then there's some commitments and assignments that we're taking care of at the county board level. So those set-asides are designated for very specific purposes as well. Any questions on the general fund before I start hitting some highlights of the various other activities?
One question, the tax delinquent, so that's always, we're a month behind the last. That's why that number's high.
Tax delinquents would be from anything from, so in the county settlement process, the tax deed process, that's the delinquent taxes that have been accepted by the county that the county is then collecting on the various municipalities' behalf. So once those monies have not yet been collected or the taxpayers didn't pay those amounts, the county will settle on those dollar amounts, make the municipalities whole, the towns, the villages, the whatnot whole. And then that's the amount that represents that we have left to be collected. And that's not necessarily a like 1 month lag. That's like a year to date or a inception to current. So all years combined, it's a cumulative number over a multi-year process.
I thought it was reduced down to way below this. That's why I'm saying it just doesn't see. I thought we had it done under under 100,000. Now it's 2 million. So that's why I'm saying, is it a delayed thing?
Well, the total amount that you
Because
might
the second half isn't in this, but it should have been in for the other years.
This amount that you're seeing there, the 2 million, is more than just the county's local levy. This is everybody's levy.
Correct.
On top.
That's tax delinquent.
Right.
Everything.
Correct.
It's still, all right.
But I believe, Jonathan, it's not the total of what we've taken in on tax deed property. It's the amount owed on taxes that haven't been paid yet.
Delinquent, yes, that's what I'm saying.
It's still outstanding.
We've reduced that down to below this
Would
number.
it be fair to say, though, that this audit report,
Well, I mean, these are the financial results for 2023. So, I mean, obviously, I haven't seen if there's any additional information. I guess I'm not sure exactly what the figure that you're referring to. I'm not sure what that number is, so.
I thought last year when you had it down under, so that would be, or say 2 years ago, 2022, that we were under 100,000, but it has 2 million all the way back to 2020.
I can certainly dig into that number, and I think it's.
That greatly, I thought.
the number you're speaking of is down to that number. I have that information from Amanda. She subsequently was supposed to send that out to you, but I'll get that to you.
But then it still shows up like this, all right.
And I think there's probably some comparison issues that you're looking at for more or less a county dollar amount, the amount that's applicable to the county government. Whereas in my summary audit report here, this is due to the tax collection process of the state of Wisconsin. The amount that's showing up as delinquent is including a lot of other people's delinquents, all the various townships, the villages, what have you. It's included in that number too. So for when you're looking at my number in this summary, it includes a lot more information than I think what you're referring to.
Okay,
We can definitely get a lot more clarity for you for sure on that.
all right.
So switching gears a little bit then into special revenue funds. These are separate funds. They're separate funds on your books that are maintained independently. They have their own, balance sheets, everything like that. They have their own revenues and expenditures that are going against them. So what you're seeing here on the bottom of page 2 is just the fund balance or the reserves that are set aside, which they're then restricted for those specific purposes. So from a standpoint of looking at historical trends, typically I'd only raise your attention to anything that's in a negative fund balance situation. So if it's in a negative, there should be obviously many more discussions as to what that activity is, what are the revenue sources versus what are we seeing as the operational expenditures. Yes, Tran?
Okay, I don't want to get ahead of you here, so forgive me if I'm asking out of turn. The ADRC fund, I don't have a ruler with me, but it appears that fund balance is about $600,980. Is that restricted?
Yes, it's completely restricted to the ADRC activity.
To the ADRC, but it isn't, if the county wanted to spend further funds in those programs, the county would be able to do that?
So the ADRC and a lot of these special revenue funds, you have state sources going into them, so state restricted grants going into them. So long as the additional spending would want to go, that would be eligible for those programs within ADRC, yes. They would be restricted and available to be used to meet those specific
So
programs.
I guess what I'm getting at here, to be open and honest about it, is that I learned recently that Polk County has a waiting list for the elderly and disabled to receive Meals on Wheels. That there are people who are eligible for the program who are on a waiting list to receive the program because there's not sufficient funds for it. The program wasn't cut or anything like that, but there's just more of a need and more of a demand, and the people have been vetted and they qualify and they're on a waiting list. So I don't know what the procedure would be to maybe, increase the funding for that so we don't have so much of that going on. But I can have that conversation another time with Don or somebody.
Any other questions? Otherwise, I can turn your attention to page 3, go with the highlights here for some of your other types of funds you have in Polk County. Number 3 is your debt service fund. That's just a set aside where in governmental accounting, that's where all of your principal and interest payments are paid out of and reported in your debt service funds. Any residual balance there is obviously restricted and will be used to meet future debt service obligations. I've got another section of my presentation on debt, so I'll just kind of save those remarks for that section. Next, you have your capital projects funds. There's actually 4 separate projects or 4 separate activities that you track separately in your books. The government center remodel, this building, the grandstand, the recycling fund, the recycling center fund, and then lastly is the parks and rec trails. So all of the funds that have been designated and set aside for those activities would then be restricted to be used for those activities. And as those projects then close out, like in 2023, you had some residual stuff that needed to be accounted for that took place in 2024 for the government center remodel. As soon as all that's then completed and that project is done, that fund is then closed and any deficits or surpluses would then be transferred out back to the general fund. So the amount that you see there is set aside for those specific capital projects that we have already, that have already been approved. Switching gears a little bit, item number 5 here is your enterprise funds. So I always call this out that they're also known as your business type activities. So when you're looking at these financials versus page 2, you're going to see things in there that's more traditionally in like a for-profit business. You're going to see your fixed assets are on your books. Your long-term liabilities are listed right in here in your balance sheet as well. So you do have the nursing home. Golden Age Manor is your only remaining enterprise fund. So when you look all the way down at the bottom and you're looking at operations wise, how did Golden Age Manor do for fiscal year 2023? You see a change in net position. It's the final line in your page 3 here. See, it's actually operating at a loss of $147,000 for the year. But again, in that number, there are some non-cash items, depreciation, as well as a very large WRS pension liability expenses in there as well. Those 2 items account for $554,000 of expenses. That's a true expense to operate your nursing home, but it's a non-cash item. So it's not any cash out the door. So you factor that in there and you actually do have the nursing home is cash flowing itself to the tune of about $406,000. Obviously with any county-owned nursing home, the challenges still remain in total operations of anything that's county run or publicly run here for the nursing home industry. High costs of labor for the CNAs, the nursing staff, the increased reliance on traveling nursing pools is kind of like an industry trend, and obviously Polk County is not immune to that as well. So in terms of holding its own in maintaining current operations, it's doing well from that standpoint, but obviously it still has those challenges that remain to be faced there. The next type of fund here for you on page 4 is your internal service fund. Operates very similar to your business type activity. That's your highway department. Same type of story there for you on the top half of the page. If you just kind of jump right down to midway down the page where it says income loss or change in net position, again, that's operating at a negative $726,000 for fiscal year 2023. And then those 2 non-cash items definitely factor in there to a much greater effect. It's just over $1.1 million of expenses that are hitting that fund. So it is, your highway department did cash flow itself again in 2023, about $424,000 in terms of, making sure that maintenance and everything was getting done in your highway operations. And then the amount that is being charged out to the various other municipalities that the highway department does work for, that's at the under the rates that are charged or maintained by Wisconsin DOT. So you can see there that that's what your operations were for fiscal year 23. Then we switch gears a little bit too. You do also have your internal service fund of your health insurance, your self-funded health insurance fund. Really, when I look at these as an outside auditor, I always take a look at, are your charges for services, your premiums that are being charged to the various county departments, and by extension, county employees, are they meeting and are they keeping up with the claims rates that you've historically had? Here at Polk County, your health insurance fund has had a very significant fund balance over the last number of years. So there was a very intentional reduction of your fund balance. So keeping your premiums low while still, trying to be very cautious of the increments of the claims that were being paid out. In 2022, it kind of started to, in 2023, the claims really started to catch up and outpace what some of those projections were. So you can see in 2023, your total claims that were showing there, it actually was a reduction of $1.8 million in 2023. So a couple of more claims years like that in your health insurance fund will need some dire attention. So keep that in mind when it comes to budget season here of taking a look at specifically the premiums and the charges for your health insurance fund. Then the last section that I'll spend a little bit more time on here for you is your long-term obligations. Here at Polk County, you really only have 3 long-term debt obligations or instruments out there that you're making payments on. See everything that's listed out here for you. You are limited. State of Wisconsin has a statutory limit of the amount of general obligation debt that you can take out. It's limited to a percentage of equalized value. From a county level, there's no way you're ever going to get to the maximum statutory limit. It's just basically not feasible. But in terms of being how much debt capacity is tolerable by your taxpaying base, you're at 2.8%. In most times when I see it, very highly leveraged counties would be anywhere between 35 to 40% after some very significant capital projects. So all that being said, if you do have the need to go out and borrow, you do have the statutory capacity as well as kind of more or less the favorable amount is still available to you to borrow if you would need to. The only other caveat there is in terms of when you come to set the county levy, like the tax levy every year, there is an instrument within Wisconsin state statute that they guarantee that any GO debt will be fully allowed for in your tax levy limit calculations. So that is when you look at operations and ultimately trying to, what most governments try to do is keep our tax dollars flat. There is an allowance within the levy limit worksheet that if you need to include or increase your levy limit, your base levy limit, in order to meet your GO debt, you're allowed to use up to 100% of any general obligation principal and interest payments. For fiscal year 23, you didn't use the full amount, but you used some in order to ultimately balance your operating budget for the year. So in order to utilize this budgeting tool is kind of how I'm basically phrasing it for you here this evening. You do need to have eligible debt outstanding in order to use this mechanism here to essentially keep your levy flat. So I just bring that up and mention that to you because like I kind of prefaced my comment here, you only have 3 debt issuances outstanding. One of them will fall off here in fiscal year 27. You've got another one that's not very large that runs through 2037. And you do have some available to you, but those payments are basically aren't available to you in 2032. So in the grand scheme of things, do you need to borrow for anything, capital project wise? I mean, you can have those conversations internally, but in terms of where you're looking at for your operational budget, if you want to maintain your levy limit or your levy at a flat rate versus what would potentially happen is all of a sudden it's flat, then it would dip, and then you would end up needing to borrow and then needing to utilize this. It could essentially go down for a year or two, and then it would go right back up to the current rates. So I know that typically what we see when we assist with budgeting, that's usually a non-favorable trend in terms of overall levy. Most places, or in most public comments would be, my levy was flat, all of a sudden it dropped, and then you raised it, or you doubled my rates or something like that. When in reality, it was at the same amount, if not lower, in the grand schemes of a multi-year tax levy situation. Any questions on anything that I could give additional insight for? Otherwise, the rest of my packet here, those for anybody else that's a little bit more visual, there's some bar graphs, some charts that show essentially where the revenues, what types of revenues they are, where they're coming from, any sources like that. And then the same thing, and when it comes to expenditures, where those revenue sources, where ultimately what function in expenditures they're going to support.
You know how long CLA has been working with Polk County?
CLA and their predecessor firm, a number of years is what I'll say, before my time.
I thought so.
Any other questions that I can help address?
Federal grant money in here.
You don't address those. No comment, thank you.
I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Good job. Need a motion on the committee as a whole.
Motion to go into committee as a whole.
Second it.
Any discussion on the? All in favor?
Aye.
Same sign. All right, we're now in the form of committee as a whole, so in discussion, pretty freely handled in reference to the rural addressing issue. Do you have something to say, Mo?
Just that, the town chairman had spoke earlier, Paul, with his, we have, comments from Sheriff Walk, and then Attorney William Malone, has comments also on this.
Okay, where do you want to bring the sheriff up?
Sure.
I would just say that I support the county ordinance. I support the work the staff at zoning has done. I support Paul and the work his town has done. The fact that they took the initiative to get in compliance with your ordinance. They went through with it, and now there's an opportunity to do that. And I can tell you from public safety perspective, the grid system is foolproof. And I recognize that, yeah, we have much better things now with GPS, but those things don't always work. When I hire a deputy who's not from here, they have 950 square miles of area to patrol. And when they get dispatched to a call, when it's on the grid, you can visualize it. It's a grid. Streets run north and south, avenues run east and west. It starts at the southeast county. When somebody says they live now on 133rd and that doesn't mean anything, well, it does. It's 13.3 miles north from the county line. It's a very simple process. Fire departments have changed over the years. They're combining. Ambulances are combining. So you don't always get the local guy that's going to respond. That addressing system is very foolproof. So I certainly support the address. I've worked with it now for close to 30 years, and I can find a lot of places. I get lost when I get dispatched to a town or a village or a city when they're not in the county grid system. But as far as, I'm a hunter, I'm an outdoorsman, I bring GPS, it's fabulous, but I also carry my compass because there's times the GPS doesn't work. And it's good to have a redundant backup system, and that's what the grid is. And it has stood the test of time. Here we are 40 plus years later, and it still works. So that's where I stand. I support the zoning office and the work they've done, and I support the town.
Thanks, Sheriff. Malia, would you make comments for us in reference to your opinions, legal and otherwise, in reference to this system that we adopted some time ago? And I think we can expedite things if you would give us your opinion.
Certainly. What we are talking about today is the county ordinance. This is an ordinance that the county adopted and then implemented by staff, and the town has participated in the county ordinance process in order to bring addresses into compliance. It is certainly not a situation where a zoning administrator went rogue and decided to implement things, or staff decided to implement things. This is your ordinance as a county board. This is your policy. And the provision within the ordinance that allows for the petitions that did go through the committee process and are now here before you requires a specific finding if the board were to ultimately grant the petitions and allow the addresses to remain what they historically had been. And they can only approve, and I'm going to read this directly from the ordinance, if you find that implementation of the ordinance, in other words, changing the addresses on the subject properties, would not aid first responders. So you have information from the sheriff, and I hate to speak for other staff, but I know that specifically dispatch and other first responders are all in unison saying implementing this ordinance on these properties will aid in first responder services, emergency services, fire protection, and law enforcement activities. So if this board were to grant any one of the individual petitions, it would be then saying that the sheriff is wrong, the first responders are wrong, and the 911 dispatch center and their viewpoints are wrong, because they all believe that implementing the ordinance is in the best interests of first responders, emergency services, fire protection, law enforcement, and civil defense. Having said that, this is your ordinance, and the mechanism by which to have a different outcome, in other words, to settle in with the feelings, which I think everybody can acknowledge and understand about the difficulty of changing one's address. The ordinance itself would need to be addressed, and that's not before this county board today. So under the current ordinance, given the information that was provided at the committee level, I don't believe that this board is in a position to make that finding, that implementing the ordinance as written and as passed by the town would not aid in all of those emergency responder elements that are outlined in your ordinance. So today, each of the petitions are listed. My understanding is some of the petitions were not complete. There were some public comments about maybe some completion after the fact or an addendum being provided to the petitions. The petitions were filed before the committee meeting. Anything filed subsequent to the committee meeting should simply be treated as a public comment and not as a part of the original petition. I also would caution the board as it relates to potential litigation in the future. And speaking candidly in open session about potential litigation can be a delicate balance for attorneys, but understand right now you have several interested parties. You have the sheriff, who is a constitutional officer. You have the town government, the town board. All of these entities have an interest in the ordinance as written and the implementation. So if the county board were to make a finding that is contrary to the evidence, you would be subject, you meaning the county board, would be subject to litigation. I'm not saying it would happen, but it's definitely a potential. In addition, looking at litigation as it occurs when there is an incident. So in places where, because of the failure of a system, law enforcement, or first responder, ambulance, folks are not able to get to a particular property in time, and it was not, it was a result perhaps of the county board not implementing the ordinance that they passed themselves, that could open up the county to being a defendant in litigation as it relates to injury or loss of life, so a wrongful death lawsuit. All of these things are, of course, unlikely. The hope is everyone who needs emergency services will always have those services available. We hope there's not a natural disaster or some other event that limits electricity, that limits the ability for the satellites and GPS to do what they've been made to do. But with tornadoes and with the state of the world today, that's not so outside of the scope of possibilities, which is why the grid system itself is something that's relied upon. But that's a policy issue. And of course, if you wanted to at some point look at the ordinance because you don't like the ordinance that is your ordinance, even though you weren't the part of the board that maybe passed the ordinance, this is the county board's ordinance and the current county ordinance. So those are my recommendations. Consider the liability. Consider the fact that this is your ordinance and that you would have to make a finding that would be contrary to the information that has already been provided to you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Anybody have any questions?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Oh, wait a minute. No, no.
Then why do
I'm
you
talking-
make it
I'm
mandatory? Why
I'm
don't you make
talking
it
to the
mandatory
county
for the
board.
entire county?
You're out of order. And I'll
leave.
tell you what,
I'll
thank you.
leave.
That's a pleasure.
Then
Thank
you
you.
should have made it mandatory for all
Thank
of
you.
them.
Yeah, right, okay. I thought,
Malia, I have a comment I'd like to run by you.
does anybody have anything to say?
I do.
Steve does.
Go ahead.
Malia, I'm gonna go back to the decision we made previously on this issue. And I took the liberty to pull a map up. And here's the hypothetical that I'm gonna give you. My name is Pete. I'm from St. Paul. I was told to come and work up at Amory Ambulance. I'm an outstanding EMT. And I worked with one yesterday on a call that was outstanding. And Mary came from Woodbury. They're manning the ambulance out of Amory, and the call comes in for a heart attack on 1850 Holmes Circle, or Holmes Court. So they get in the ambulance and they come down. I'm reading the map as I say that. Here I come. Here we come down. We hit Holmes Court. We take a left, and we come to 1850. Okay. The call came in as 1850B as in boy. So we see 1850, there's a fire number there hopefully, and we go to the next one and it's 1850A. So, oh, good, we're going the right way. We drive more distance down the road and we come to 1850 AA. Well, we haven't hit B yet, so let's go, we'll keep going. The next address we hit is 1850D as in dog, okay? We say, well, it must not have been, we must have missed a sign or there must be, so we turn around. Looking for B, we should have found it by now. Turn around, there's no sign. We keep going down the road. The next sign we hit is 1850C. Now the numbers are going backwards. Now we hit 18C. It's a dead end road, okay? The very last house on that road is 1850B as in boy. Okay. The county board allowed this system to remain when this issue came up, just like it's coming up now. In my opinion, and I know you can't speak of lawsuits, if this person didn't make it, there's a lot of confusion on where that address is. The county board made the decision to let them leave the addresses as they are. That was a mistake, I feel very strongly. And That's what I'm asking you about. What do you feel about that?
Right, so the exposure to liability or knowing that there is this issue with being able to locate A, B, C, and Ds on addresses because they're given out, as I understand it, in the order to which the addresses are applied for. And Ms. McCurdy can correct me if I'm wrong. And so the letters will be assigned not based upon the order in which they appear on the road, but the order in which the addresses are given out. And the county, and I tread very lightly on speaking about potential liability in open session. But could the county have liability in a circumstance like that? Absolutely.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any comments or questions? Okay, possible action regarding the incomplete
Yeah, we're still in.
We have to come out of committee to
We're
hold
still
it
in
back.
committee of the whole.
Need a motion. Just a second, I've heard the committee. Are you gonna go through each one? What did the committee decide? On each one of these?
what, they're all in one.
Are they all under one thing or did each one, they said some passed, some didn't? I didn't see it
That's
here
why
where
we-
it says that.
I
Just
thought we
my
had,
packet, it
we
didn't
had a
say.
list of that in, general government.
Public safety.
Public safety minutes. Basically, I mean, I'm the chair of that committee.
Okay.
Basically, the vote was generally for most of this, except with the exception of one, and I can't pinpoint exactly which one it is. Jay and I voted no, and the rest of the committee voted yes to forward it to county board.
But
So every vote went,
every vote was to change.
So you voted?
no, just to bring it to the county board.
Oh, you didn't decide to change them or not? You didn't do
Just to
that part?
bring.
Without recommendation.
Without,
Without recommendation, they were brought forward, all of them.
They were with recommendation.
with recommendation. We had a recommendation.
Yeah,
They were
They were complete with one
Votes.
exception of one.
Right.
With the
So
exception
they
of
all were
Recommendation to
recommended except
Go
for,
against
except
the
for the first
ordinance?
one, I believe, right?
Anderson, Lane, and the court.
Is that the one?
I'd have to go back to the minute.
Through the minutes, I don't remember.
Chair, can I,
Go ahead.
just to let you know, there were two that were forwarded to county board without recommendation. Those two are items number listed as 3, the Tanglewood Trail et al. And then number 4, Muir Waters. Those two were without recommendation. All the other ones proceeded to the board with recommendation.
Okay,
In which way? Recommended
Recommended,
change?
recommended to change,
To keep their address.
to keep their addresses.
So they're recommending that we go against our own policy.
right.
Correct.
Yes, yes.
And the vote was generally 3-2.
That's
Wasn't
why,
unanimous.
that's why we voted against it, is because of the exposure.
We felt strongly that
I mean, I remember I was on the board when we did
Yeah.
that ordinance. And we had a lot of discussion, a lot of comments. Remember, we had people bringing in big maps and stuff.
I know.
We spent hours and hours on this thing. And we all came to agreement that the ordinance we felt was going to provide better safety for our community and across the county, because it's just not targeting lakes. It's across the county that this will be implemented. And that was the general consensus. And we approved it at our town board in the town of St. Croix Falls when I was on that board. And I worked with wherever you are back here from the town of Balsam Lake on both fire signs and address changes. And that all went through the town. You worked on that on the town board too. No, maybe.
It was approved at our town board.
Yeah, it was approved.
Unanimously.
So if there's no more discussion about these, we then have to go out of the committee as a whole to make to act on the petitions that we just discussed.
Correct. Once discussion's done and you want to move out of committee of the
If
whole.
there's no more discussion, we'd entertain a motion to go out of committee.
I move we go back to general session.
Second that.
Motion made and seconded. Any more discussion in reference to that? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Now, we have to act on each category. The possible regarding incomplete petitions, possible action. We have a, Dan,
Chair, I'd like to recluse myself from voting because I am involved in one of the petitions.
you are recused. Okay, any possible action in the incomplete petitions? We entertain a motion for.
Do we know which ones they are?
You know which two?
They were number 3 and 4.
Excuse me?
3 and 4.
3 and 4 were complete.
Incomplete.
The Roman numeral.
Ones were not complete.
Yeah, so 3 and 4 were sent with recommendation for denial or not incomplete. 1 and 2 were the only petitions that were complete with all signatures.
Okay.
At the time of the committee meeting.
So then we're looking at 3 through 7 are the incomplete.
That are
That are
incomplete.
incomplete.
Right. Okay. Anybody got any questions on reference to the category of the petitions? All right, and the motion is to. I didn't, what's the motion?
There wasn't.
There wasn't one.
There's no motion yet.
A motion to act on the possible incomplete petitions, which, to make it clear, is 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7.
Motion made, I'll make a motion.
Yeah.
Disallow the petitions and change the addresses according to the Polk County ordinance. I'll second.
Petition made and seconded, ordinance. Made and seconded, all, any discussion in reference to what, or to clarify it? Go ahead, Russ.
Why would we act on incomplete petitions? And while we act on them again, if they come back complete? Why don't we act on the completed petitions, which will set the stage for incomplete that become complete?
It was my understanding, Mr. Warndall, your motion was to, as all the petitions as a whole, right? You didn't, you didn't specify complete or incomplete?
You're acting on the.
Well, you didn't.
I didn't give specific numbers, but I can amend
You
my
just said the petition.
motion to say all petitions
That's what I thought you meant.
will be denied and that the numbering system according to the Polk County ordinance will be applied to all the addresses
In the county.
in the county.
Everybody understand? Any more discussion on that? Go ahead.
I just want to clarify for Supervisor Arcan that the reason we're acting on them is because they were moved to the board for action.
All right, but how do you act on them incomplete? My question is, when they become complete, do they come back again? Do they come back here when they're complete?
Malia, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, the ordinance is silent as to how often or with what frequency petitions can be filed. So I would likely presume that a new petition would have to be addressed again at the committee level. Denying a petition for lack of completeness does mean you're not making a finding as to the merits of the petition, just that it wasn't complete. So if we were in a court and that were addressed, it could come back. It's like dismissed without prejudice. You can bring it back when you have your case ready. Where a denial based upon, even if we assumed these petitions were complete, we're still going to make a finding under the ordinance, then it would put to bed those petitions regardless of completeness. And I think all of those options are available to the board depending upon how the motion is made. So if Mr. Warndall wanted to modify his motion to include all of the petitions for the reasons we've already stated on the county board's record, I think you could do that. But it certainly would be up to the board.
I believe that's what my motion did. Correct me if I'm
So,
wrong.
so the motion,
Yep, that's.
the motion on the floor is appropriate. Is that what you're telling us?
Yes.
He said to disallow all the petitions, and move
Right.
forward with the addressing the in compliance with the ordinance.
Anybody have any questions in reference to that for clarification purposes? Okay,
Roll call vote, please.
roll call.
Everybody clear on the motion? Okay, usually we'd start with Dan Ruck, but he is recused. Sharon Kelly,
Yes.
Jeremy Hall,
No.
Tim O'Connell,
No.
Tony Johnson,
Abstain.
An abstention would result in a no vote because he did not seek permission from the chair to abstain unless the chair would want to reconsider whether or not the abstention is for cause, and then it would not count in the affirmative or the negative.
We'll go no.
Jay Luke,
Yes.
Fran Duncanson,
Yes.
Russ Arkand,
Yes.
Keith Karpinski,
Yes.
John Bonaprise,
Bill.
Brad Olson. He's not there.
He had to leave he was excused at 7:15, so he's probably gone.
Right. Doug Rowdy,
Yes.
Steve Wornall,
Yes.
Pamela Garvey,
Yes.
and Tracy LeBlanc.
Yes.
That should be 9 yeses, 4 noes, 1 abstention, and 1 absent.
Okay,
Counted, I double count in my brain.
that's very.
You'll be hearing.
Okay, that means that we get, of course, passed, and we do not, the motion passed, and we do not need to act on 11, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, administrator's budget.
Be happy to.
All of us.
You'll be hearing. Good evening, everyone. That time of year to get going, really heavy into the budget. The first part of my presentation, I gave this to all the committees, was back to 2023. The 2023 October budget was balanced. The board okayed more projects, which created a deficit of $2.2 million. Almost our under spending. 2024 was the same with a $1.3 million deficit. The 2023 audit showed we came in only at a $2.1 million deficit. That $800,000 is mostly carryover projects from that previous year. So we're sitting right there. Next slide. 2023 audit shows this is the available fund balance that we have, $7 million.
Yeah.
Fund balance sits at approximately $30 million. You see what's reserved and already committed to 5.6. Next slide. These are your board priorities. Let me go over those again. Next slide. Public safety, we upgraded 911. We did the upgrade of tasers, additional communications officer, upgraded the presence of the Justice Center. And the government center here under consideration for this 2025 budget, additional patrol positions and replacement of squads. Substance abuse, we're in year 4 of 5 of the drug-free community grant, year 3 of the TAG grant for diversion programs. We had Narcan training, alcohol compliance checks, and support for the sober programming like the Onyx House. One of the things under consideration was a family recovery court, similar to CJCC. Staff had gone to other counties to look at this, looking at possible implementation of that. Next slide. Next slide is broadband. We've talked about this. We've done a significant investment in broadband. There's a lot of dollars still out there in federal money, $1.1 billion to be distributed in Wisconsin. We still have that $1 million we did for to support broadband. Of that, there's $800,000 still on the table. That was try to do that final connection with Polk County. So how do we use that? We can use it for areas such as Osceola, not eligible for grants, for run fiber from the house to the road. This is the hard part to do that because all that is different depending on the provider and that and how to distribute those funds. So those are funds available to the board if they use to change them out. Next slide. And why I mentioned that about using those funds, do we declare victory? Right now, we're at 93% coverage of high-speed internet in our ditches, far above the state's average of 80 or 58%. So it's just that last connection getting people to sign up with, which is very difficult to do depending on how long their driveway is and their provider they have on there and what that cost is. Next slide. Parks and trails, we did a lot of actions here. We got upgrades at D.D. Kennedy, the Sterling ATV Park, the extensive use park is almost ready to go with signage. That should be opened up here in a few weeks, hopefully, if not by November. We have the Clam Falls Dam, which is under construction, the new bathrooms at the St. Croix Falls trailhead. And then under consideration for the budget is Lake Magner's dock replacement. And we have the fair, the bleachers there. And you'll see in my budget later on that we do have earmarks for that. And we're just approving those funding marks right there. That's not approving the project itself. It's just an earmark for those funds. How we decide to pay for that, there will be a further discussion later on. Housing, next slide. We do have the grant. Amory got that first grant of the $200,000 for $70,000. So that's going very well with 10 units there. Next slide. Infrastructure, the priorities for 2023 were roads. County Road B will be a 2025 project. With buildings and services, we have the recycling center project slowly getting completed. Slowly. Overall, the county position is strong. We're meeting the challenge of increasing tight revenues, which is a struggle. Solid progress on the board priorities with in all areas. Our workforce is stable. You know, we've been able to retain people. Some people, not always legal counsel, but we've been able. Discipline is key. Using all our tool to achieve our priorities and keeping our levy flat and stable. And when I mean flat, that's not including new construction. That is really the only thing that can raise our levy. So we try to keep our levy flat with our bonding and other programs. Next slide. This is where we sit tonight. Got a copy of the draft budget book right here. You staff are putting that together and the directors, department heads and management, working on the budget. So then comes the work in October with the committees, if there's going to be any changes to that or any additions to that. Next slide. How the budget breaks down on the expense side, pay and benefits is about $1.5 million. AFRs are additional funding requests for about $300,000. That $300,000 is primarily those three positions in law enforcement. Modest increase in non-employee operation expenses, 10 grand, capital expenses for capital projects. Right now I have $2.37 million in projects. Revenue, relatively flat, except for net new construction is, our levies up 280K there. Shared revenue is slightly up. Our investments are projected higher than 2024, but they're softening with our environment, sales tax. We've been revising that as the last couple of months have dipped down a little bit. A little more reserve there. Our bonding estimate right now is right between, our available for bonding is 1.7 to 2.2, and that's in my budget right now to have a balanced budget. Still need to be fiscally conservative. Next slide. Managing on the manager side, this is what we harp on. You know, we look at every position that comes open and when we hire, We have staff try to flatten and reduce operating expenses where possible. This is very challenging in our environment with inflation and projects. Along with the additional increase in staffing. On the revenue side, we try to recover our costs where possible. Fees, we see operational revenue. Pursue additional funding for grants and consider bonding for capital projects. And bonding has become more and more prevalent in this. And part of the draft budget in front of you is bonding. Next slide. Beautiful chart shows how the revenue sources break out for different areas. From tax levy is general property tax levy is $23 million. In that, next slide. Capital improvement projects. In the last couple of years, most of our funding has been done with ARPA. Those funds now are fully committed. So the 2025 projects, we have two options: spend down our general fund, reallocate broadband, tap the highway fund, deplete that, or bond for projects, which is our best opportunity, in my opinion. My recommendation for bonding per project, the rates right now are favorable for us. We'll make more money borrowing money than spending down our savings accounts. This is to keep our portion of the levy flat. And we have the ability to bond for $1.7 to $2.2 million. Right now, of that, I believe it's $1.8 million set aside for bonding at this point. But that can change if you want to add another project. And that's to retain the general fund balance for future needs. One of the other components that is an option in the budget, which won't affect the budgets that is funny that we've talked about, next slide, is a recycling fee. So in June, we talked in the committee of the whole about the recycling fee and a special charge. Looking at the future of the recycling center and keeping that whole and to stand on its own feet. In October, there'll be a resolution for the special charge going to the General Government Committee for further discussion. That charge right now, we're estimating that will bring in the revenue of approximately $700,000. If the resolution passes in October, then that 2025 will be a transition year. The recycling fund will hold its dollars till spent. The levy of $350,000 will be retained for 2025 and then reallocated in 2026, helping us out balance the budget again. The CIP then in October budget book would be updated for this capital cost. Next slide. It's the way our levy looks right now. You can see this year, right now, it was 23.1. We're projecting it to be at 23 even. What that means is lowering the levy down about $70,884 or 0.3%. In the budget book, we talk about levy all the time and taxpayers. There's a good graphic on page 19 that shows the dollar and where your taxes go. It's very eye-opening because many people think that county gets all the money, and we really don't. We have a portion of it that we try to deal with. I thought that's a good graphic. Sales tax, next slide. This is the way sales tax is looking. We see those two lines coming together because in the past, we've budgeted very conservatively to put money in the bank and keep that up there. And as things get tighter and tighter and tighter, we try to hit that number closer and closer. And every month, Don gets more nervous as that line gets closer that we're not going to make our sales tax. But that's why that line is coming closer. It's just another budget tool. And right now, I think we're holding back another couple $100,000 just to make sure that the economy comes out where we need it to. Big picture budget, next slide. Where our expenses go, naturally our personnel costs are professional services. That service up here, up in the corner, that's our outstanding debt or our bonding number that we come through, we pay every year. Next slide. Next slide. So additional funding requests that I have in the budget right now. These are the ones that are approved. You see at the top of the deep project. The second one down is the project. We have $600,000 in there. The estimate from our engineer working with GT Grandstands is approximately $1.7 million. If we have another estimate in from another manufacturer that could do permanent bleachers at the same capacity for $500,000. That does not have a roof, though. The definition of a grandstand has a roof. If we want a roof on it, that's an extra $500,000.
So the
we're-
first one has a roof, the 1.7?
1.7 has a roof. The other one for $500,000 does not. If we want to add one, it's another $500,000.
So
Is that the total?
$1 million then instead of 1.7 if we use the permanent bleachers and add a roof?
And add a roof.
1.7 if we go with the other company.
If we go with the other company.
Do it all.
And is that the total cost of the project?
The $600,000 covers the concrete work for the permanent grandstands. That was the only addition.
We
Oh,
have
we-
any participation with the Fair Society?
I resent the email I sent out,
I saw that.
waiting for a response back to them so we can set up our meeting with them to discuss their participation in the project and then bring that forward to the board on with that. So
But
right
your
now,
figures are all ours.
what's that?
Your figures are all on our shoulders.
Right now, this is a placeholder for dollars. You approving this does not approve, you're not approving the project itself,
Right.
the funding. So,
All right.
but along with that, we have squad cars, we have skid steers, we have tuck pointing brick at the museum. The sheriff has power inverters at the towers, poultry barn at the fair, lighting at the fair, ventilation in the admin building. Docket, hangar again, placing land and waters boat for $12,000 and motor.
We're just doing a seal on it.
But it's 2.37.
Where would we see the money that's going to be needed for the recycling center for all the new equipment that they need? Is that in 25?
That's not in 25. The special assessment or whatever goes forward first, and then it's in the capital project for the 5-year outlay,
Okay,
going out that way.
but if we took money out of the savings account to do that, we could be operational with that much sooner too, right?
We could if you wanted to spend on the fund, the general fund, yes. Which is an option. Then with the assessment with recycling, the fee does not cover all the equipment immediately. It'd be
Yeah.
phased in at that point as we go with the subsequent years.
So at what point do we have that discussion
On the recycling,
on the recycling center?
the fee,
Yeah,
that'll be going to general government for the resolution for discussion in October. And then to the board. Next slide. Some of the operational costs, the 3 full-time positions at the sheriff's department. LiDAR on the web application line. Adjustment, these are a couple increases here. And these were done, although we just went through a wage study, as a new director came in, this was kind of reorganizing the zoning and the ES division. And that was missed in the wage study. So these are ones I approved for the adjustment for positions. The adjustment for the zoning tech to zoning specialist is a credential item as they get their certifications for certain things as they encumber that bump. Other ones are budget neutral with just a grade change. Next slide. Proposed funding sources, this is what we have right now for that. The bonding would be at $1.8 million. The 1/10 fund is our internal loan fund where the departments request funding, then they pay us back, the general fund back in 5 years with that. So just another way to self-fund. You see the levy there is only $320,000. And the recycling fund coming out of that one, total of 2.6. If we don't bond these, there are other options are utilizing our general fund and paying down the highway fund also to cover the cost of these projects. Next slide. Prior to the October 15th board meeting, where the work begins with the committees, countywide revenue solidified. This is where I need all the recommendations back to the administrator as we work through the committees and you have ideas that you want to put into the budget to try to get in there. This is the time to put it in there in October, so that we're not standing on the floor in November making budget changes. So we'd like to have the budget complete for the county board on the 15th and make those final decisions so we get the budget out. Related to FTEs, market adjustments, benefits, all that's solidified at that point. We're still working a little bit on benefits and final numbers on those. Anything that's in the budget book here that's pending or has that, you'll notice it's highlighted in yellow where there'll be changes and additions as information comes forward or changes from the committees come forward with that. Next slide. Board considers any additional projects on the 15th. We'll have the resolution for the public hearing in November, standard there. We'll have the resolution on bonding. Bonding needs three-fourths majority vote in November for that one. And then the recycling special charge, that'll be the discussion going through committee. Our thought right now is it'll be discussed at Public Works, Public Safety, since that's a recycling center comes underneath. That'll be discussion only. Action will be taken at general government because they are the financial arm. Next slide. I have for you, unless you have questions.
Is your public hearing gonna be before the October,
It's before the November meeting.
before the November meeting?
That's when the public hearing is.
And we vote on
First week in November.
Yep, we'll vote
12th?
November 12th. We'll vote on that, which in October, you'll see on the committee members, I believe it's general government is the only committee that needs to move.
Health and Human.
Health and Human Services will have to move on another date. We'll have to move those meetings up so that you're not meeting after
Yep.
you pass the budget on the 12th. That's all I have for you right now. So take the book, review it. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to myself. Where we post the knowledge with numbers. And just want to again thank staff, our budget staff and our managers on putting the budget together.
Take the homework.
Okay. Moving on. Confirmation of appointments by county board chairman. A motion on nothing. No appointment.
So
1 to 14, administrator, do you have any appointments?
I do not, Mr. Chair.
None on that. I really haven't much of anything to report that you're not totally apprised of and sick of probably. So I'll skip that administrator's report.
I only have a couple things. We did have a bird test positive for West Nile virus in the county that was found dead. Due diligence with that. So we did that. We had 2 bats that tested positive for rabies also. Public health completed compliance checks in Frederick, Luck, and Milltown in September. They had 7 sales out of 12 attempts. 5 out of those 7 sales did check ID but sold anyways. All 3 municipalities are issuing citations as of the 13th of September.
Okay,
And that's all I have, Chair.
okay, thank you. Any announcements from supervisors? From any announcement? Fran,
I just have a quick one. I attended the Workforce Development County Consortium Board meeting. Almost the entire discussion at the board meeting was job service offices. throughout Wisconsin, including Polk County. And Polk County, we have it over here with the, I think of the name of the department. Anyways, the used to be WITC. However, they're looking more and more at having the job centers, that local libraries are stepping up and helping out with that and making space available for people and kind of trying to, so much of it is done online now. And so kind of trying to help people through that process, online with job center services. So that's a good cooperative effort.
Thank you. Anybody else? Steve, go ahead.
I just went to the double graduation for CJCC. It was rewarding to sit and watch those people be that happy. They're getting their lives back. And I don't know what the channel is, but I think we really need to address this other issue in fairness to the people that are on Deer Lake, to the people that are on Big Lake. So we obviously have some problems there that could show us some liability, and whatever the channel is, we'll need to put that on. Notify those people or talk to zoning, and see what the process is. To fix it.
Okay. Follow up on that then. Johnny,
Yeah, 2 weeks ago, I attended the Big Lake Round Lake Association. How does all the other, so now I'm a voting member of that every month. Does all the Lake Association, are they're a voting member every month? Okay.
they all have their own rules.
Amory Lakes is.
They all have their own rules, yeah. So
They all have their own rules. So, I mean, it's
scary, yeah.
Yeah.
they're an entity in itself.
And then Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday is our state Wisconsin County Association. These are all the resolutions. I went through all of them last year. I introduced 5 of them, and we all got passed from Polk County. We don't have any from Polk County this year. It's what we call like a lame duck session with the legislature. But so the way the whole process works, I think I mentioned it last. It starts at the county, it goes to the Wisconsin counties, and then we vote on them, and then it goes to the legislature. So we start voting at 3:00 this Sunday at La Crosse. I'll be there Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, and I'll bring back all the good news next month.
Lame duck session, huh?
Yeah.
Sounds like every year.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any comments? Not logical, I mean, then, any facetious.
That's the trade name for it.
Yeah, right. Okay, yeah, I understand. Well, anything else?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to adjourn, all in favor?